Here we are, sadly, now our last week of classes. So we continue with Roman mythology, but now we are telling about the seeking of an heroic lineage for Roman identity and the prominent rulers. So here you can see a statue of a famous Roman myth, The Rape of the Sabines by Gian Bologna. That's here in Florence, in Piazza della Signoria, Loggia dei Lanzi. And so Roman mythology is the body of traditional tales and stories about ancient Rome legendary origins and the whole religious system, both represented in literature and in visual arts of the Romans. But then, Roman mythology may also refer to the modern study of these representations and to this subject represented in literature and art of other cultures in any period. But the writers who handled mythological subjects typically dealt with patriotic legends. That's very particular of Roman mythology. That especially glorify the Roman past or love tales. Why this? So, through these stories, they were paying tribute to the state or to love. Love as the basis of the family. And all of this in turns derived from the most important mythology, the Greek mythology, from which for sure the Romans have learned. Sometimes they achieved through originality, and we have especially two examples: Virgil in his epic poem The Aeneid, and Ovid in his poetic compilation The Metamorphoses. So, Romans usually treated their traditional stories, narratives as historical. So, this is more prominent than in other classical mythologies. Even when these were full of miraculous and supernatural events. The stories are so, according to their nature, the Romans' nature, often concerned with politics and morality, the two major things of Roman society. And how an individual personal integrity relates to his or her responsibility to the community or Roman state. This was one of the greatest strengths of the Romans, to feel this strong sense of community. And heroism is an important theme in Roman mythology. I give here an example, the one of Mucius Scaevola. So, he is a hero because he snapped into the Etruscan camp to kill Lars Porsenna. So after the expulsion of the kings of Rome, the Etruscan kings, Lars Porsenna grouped the Etruscans and tried to reconquer Rome. And once he was there, he said, "I am Gaius Mucius, a citizen of Rome. I came here as an enemy to kill my enemy, and I am as ready to die as I am to kill. We Romans act bravely, and when adversity strikes, we suffer bravely." Then he sticks his right hand in the fire. That's because he's called Scaevola, meaning lefty. So, the founding of Rome for sure can be investigated through archaeology. but traditional stories handed down by the ancient Romans themselves explain the earliest history of their city. And especially in terms of legend and myths, because we don't have historical sources about the very first moments of the city. The most familiar of these myths that everybody knows is the one about Romulus and Remus, probably the most famous of all Roman myths. Romulus and Remus, the twin brothers who were suckled by a she-wolf. So, according to legend, Rome was founded by Romulus in 753 BCE, Romulus becoming its first king, when he traced a furrow in the earth to mark the boundaries of the city. Romulus was then succeeded by other 6 kings. So Romulus and his twin brother Remo were rescued by the she-wolf who cared for them until a herdsman called Faustulus found and raised them. The first who told this story was a man called Fabius Pictor, the first of Roman annalists, about 200 BCE. So the annalists were those first historians who were writing history year by year. So following this list of events happening year by year, called the annals, because annus in Latin means year. So the traditional and formal founding of the city happened in 753 BCE. Then Livy, in his monumental history of Rome, so Livy, the historian living in the 1st century BCE, embellished and gave the story a literary setting, saying, "In those days the countryside there was wild and empty. The story goes that when the waters receded, the basket in which the twins had been abandoned was left on dry land. A she-wolf, on her way from the hills round about to drink, came across the howling infants. She gave them her teats to suck, and was so gentle with them that the king's shepherd found her licking them with her tongue." This is in the 1st chapter, paragraph 4 of the History of Rome by Livy. So this is a statue of the she-wolf that then would have become the icon of Rome foundation, and it's a life-size bronze statue of a she-wolf with 2 human infants suckling her, and it's preserved in Rome in the Capitoline museums. So, but the story goes on and has a precedent. So the sources giving us more details are Livy again and Plutarch in the life of Romulus. So the legend tells how a local king called Numitor of the city of Alba Longa in Latium, so near Rome, was ejected by his younger brother Emulius. To secure his position, Emulius murdered Numitor's son and forced Numitor's daughter, Rea Silvia, to become a Vestal Virgin, thus, he thought, preventing her from having any children. Because Vestal Virgins normally served as priestess in the temple of Vesta, so one of the earlier goddesses of Roman pantheon, for 30 years, from the age of 6 and 10 years old. The penalty for those of them who broke the vow of virginity was death. That's why Emulius forced Rea Silvia to become a Vestal Virgin. Rea Silvia, however, caught the eye of the god Mars, who had his way with her while she was sleeping. The outcome was the birth of twin sons called Romulus and Remus. Then, about archaeology, the Romans themselves were in no doubt when Rome was founded, April 21st, 753 BCE. In 1948, traces were found on the Palatine Hill, the central and most easily fortified of the hills of the city, of huts of a settlement of shepherd folk, dating from about 750 BCE. This ties very closely to the established legend of the foundation. And recent excavations uncovered the remains of a ritual boundary wall of about the same period. So, the one that, according to legend, Romulus traced. So, this is a model of the village where you can see huts and having walls made of reeds and coated with clay. And in the middle of these huts, there was a central supporting post, as you can see in this picture on the right, around which there are often traces of the earth. So pottery picked here date exactly at the mid-8th century BCE. Then near the spot where Romans preserved the memory of Romulus' house, because was founded a larger of these huts, consider the hut of Romulus himself. So this is the location in Rome of the Palatine Hill. So you see near a bend of the Tiber, and so inside what will then become the city of Rome. You can see the walls of the city later on. So the story of Romulus and Remus had to be reconciled with the tradition set earlier in time, that had the Trojan refugee Aeneas escaped to Italy and founded the line of Romans through his son Iulus, the namesake of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, from which both Julius Caesar and Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, eventually came. So, the Aeneid by Virgil and Livy's early history are the best extant sources for Rome's founding myths. So are sources for mythology, not so much for historical reconstruction. And they took material from Greek heroic legend, so on to this native stock. So, according to especially Virgil, the Trojan prince Aeneas was cast as husband of Lavinia. So, once he arrived in Italy, the daughter of King Latinus, that's the patronymical name and ancestor of the whole Latini, so the Latin people living in the region of Rome. And therefore, through a very convoluted revisionist genealogy, for a forebear of Romulus and Remus. So, by extension, the Trojans were adopted as the mythical ancestors of Roman people. So, have you understood how the Romans tried to connect the two legends, Romulus and Remus and Aeneas, so creating a genealogy, sorry, from Aeneas arriving to Romulus and Remus. So, the tradition about Aeneas traces the origin of Rome to the earlier time of this Trojan hero. that was son of a mortal father, Anchises, and of the goddess Venus. Aeneas fought against the Greeks in the Trojan War, escaped from the sack of the city, and after many wanderings, vicissitudes, and divine interventions, so lasting for 10 years, he landed in Italy. And so, as we said before, he founded the dynasty from which Romulus eventually came. So you see, we have many representation, starting from wall paintings in Pompeii, so during Roman times, to later ones, for example, in the 4th century AD, in Somerset County, so in England, showing Aeneas on his voyaging. Here you can see in the map the Aeneas' long journey. This was the version of the story much favored by the emperors of Rome, who liked to think of themselves as being nominally descended from the ancient heroes. So especially Augustus, who commissioned to Virgil the Aeneid, the first emperor, and by the Romans themselves, who could thus see the early history of their city as one of continual struggle for survival, reflected exactly in an heroic legend. So this was all written up in verse by Virgil in the Aeneid, and the whole book was then published posthumously. It became then the national epic of the Roman Empire and the most famous poem of the Roman era. So in next videos, we will start to talk about the Aeneid, a general introduction, and then the most famous books. Bye!